Let's dive in. So we're going to start just with an overview today. So the Allemande we're going to model is BWV 996, which is this one. Alright, so I'll play that in a minute in full. So just a bit of context, it's from something called a Baroque dance suite. Sometimes the term partita is used, but this is from a suite. So a suite is like a collection of dances which is opened with a prelude, and a Baroque dance is usually one of those movements, one of those dance pieces. So the most typical structure for a suite is prelude, Allemande, sarabande, jig. Okay, so you get a prelude and then a few dances, and then there's a whole host of other dances, and there's different ways to combine them and order them and things like that. But that's the base: prelude, Allemande, sarabande, jig. The dance movements were usually a mixture of French, Italian, and German dances. I will say that Bach, if you study his style and what a lot of music historians say about him, he basically combined a lot of the different features of French, Italian, and German music, which is one of the things that I think makes his music stand out. And the Allemande simply means the word German. That's just what it means, German. So it's a German dance. All right, so that's a very, very quick overview. So some basic features of the actual Allemande. Most Baroque dance movements were in binary form or rounded binary. I would say most typically binary, but you do see some with rounded binary, and each section's repeated. I don't think I've mentioned this, but the repeats will often give an opportunity for ornamentation, extra ornamentation. The Allemande, this particular Allemande, is what's called style brisé, broken style, which is an irregular arpeggiated texture. It was dominant in France, hence the French word title. And it's also called lute style, as it was a means for keyboard instruments to imitate the lute. Funny that I feel like we are always trying to play piano music now, but back then the keyboard players wanted to sound like a lute. There's actually a funny story too, because the suite, a lot of the what we call lute suites by Bach, we call them lute suites. They weren't actually written for the lute. They're a strange combination of things. Some of them are transcriptions from violin, one of the violin partitas, one of the cello suites, and then some of them were written on a lute harpsichord, Lautenwerk or something. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it, which was a lute harpsichord. So if you ever hear the term lute suite, it doesn't mean the Bach's 4 lute suites. They weren't actually composed for the lute. They've just been called that, and we just still call them that today. Allemandes start with an upbeat of 1 or 2 notes at the beginning of each section, so that's one of the defining features as well. Baroque Allemandes like this one contain little to no syncopation, with short motives combined into longer units. Here's a great quote by Matheson: "A serious and well-composed harmoniousness in arpeggiated style, expressing satisfaction or amusement, and delighting in order and calm." That's a quote about the Allemande. So some features you want to look out for: the 2 sections, each one repeated, the irregular arpeggiated texture, the upbeats. That was a pretty small feature, but still important. And then no syncopation, little to no syncopation. The rhythms are very even and just gently flowing through the whole piece. So with that said, I will now play the Allemande for you. Okay, you're probably familiar with it. It's pretty popular Bach piece. Here we go. So we'll talk about different features now, just breaking down some of the basic elements of how it's constructed. So we'll start with melody. I do like to start with melody. We will cover harmony as well in a lot of depth. So the melody is mostly comprised of, just as most melodies are, scales and arpeggios. And I think in the Allemande, because you're going to use still brise, then you probably will use quite a bit of arpeggio lines as well as scale lines as well. Okay, so it's pretty clear that it's mostly scales and arpeggios. Red indicates scale motion, and you see it both in the melody and in the bass line. And then blue indicates arpeggiated motion, which is also in the bass and the melody line as well. And those are really just like straight chords, arpeggiated chords a lot of the times. That's what you expect in an Allemande. Okay, so pretty straightforward. You can just about write an Allemande already, because if you just set your 16th notes, your semiquavers, and just start writing scale fragments and arpeggios and just keep the semiquavers going the whole time, you'll already start off sounding it'll start to sound a bit like an Allemande, just from that one feature combined with the general features we talked about. Right, if I just improvise in E minor, right, that's just improvising your semiquavers, scales and arpeggios. Okay, so it already starts to have that kind of feel of an Allemande. So you can identify, if you want to go in depth, identify the scale segments and arpeggios in this Allemande. You can do it with other works by Bach. You'll see it. He uses that a lot. And you can generate, improvise, compose some melodic material just by using scale segments and arpeggios. And I would encourage you to do that in just a flowing semiquaver rhythm and using an upbeat. Next topic, the open and the close. So each section, and you find this in many dance movements, each section, the start and the end of the A section will be mirrored in some way in the B section. Basically, effectively, they're transposed. So what you hear, the start of the A section, you'll hear it the same material at the start of the B section, but it's transposed. The end of the A section, you'll hear the same material at the end of the B section, but it's transposed. The way the common formula for transposition is it's usually 1-5, 5-1. So 1 at the start of the A section, 5 at the end of the A section. And then 1 becomes 5 at the start of the B section, and then 5 becomes 1 at the end of the B section. So you're getting this nice, it just basically creates a nice cycle, because you start at 1, you go to 5, and then you go back to 1. 1 to 5 for the A section, you could visualize it like a circle, and then 5 back to 1 for the B section. And we'll look at that in more detail here. So we've got the that's the start of the A section, start of the B section, that's the tonic. Now we go to the dominant in that start of the B section. It's the exact same material, just transposed to the dominant key or the dominant chord. Okay, and then the end, we end the A section on the dominant on B, and then we end the B section on the tonic on E, and he ends it on E major, by the way. Virtually the same material. I mean, melodically it's identical. There's some slight changes in the texture. It's basically just a transposition. So once you've got your first bar written of the A section, you'll already have essentially have your first bar of the B section written, and once you've got the end of the A section written, you'll essentially have the end of the B section done. Because if you want to follow those guidelines, which I suggest trying, I think transposing is a really good technique to learn transposition. Next one. Now we get a little bit into counterpoint here. So conversations, there's a lot of call and response. Now counterpoint literally means note against note. However, I would argue that counterpoint can even occur when the notes are not playing simultaneously. Counterpoint can be implied by conversation, meaning one part will have a say and then another part will, it's like a call and response, right? One part will say something, a little melody, and then the bass, let's say the treble, and then the bass will respond, just like that. That, even though it's a single line, it's still implying counterpoint. So I just want to clarify that. And this Allemande does contain two voices, mostly with a third voice occasionally entering. So it sounds very full, even though it's just two voices, I think in part because of that flowing rhythm. If you've got semiquavers the whole time, you probably don't want too many voices, or it's going to be very busy. So, and the interplay of these voices creates call and response or conversations between the parts. So this is an example of seeing the voices together and what it looks like if you separate the two voices out, right? So if I play this top voice by itself, we get that beautiful melody, isn't it? Yeah?
Yeah.
Yes. And then we get the bass voice, which is going, I guess we could add this E too. But pretty full. Like if you were a guitar duet, you'd be pretty satisfied, guitar one doing that, guitar two doing that. Pretty satisfied. And that's the secret to, I think that's the secret to counterpoint. If you can create two independent voices that if you gave one part to one guitarist, the other part to the other guitarist, and they were satisfied to play those parts, but then you merged them into one guitar piece, a solo guitar, that's success. That's very successful counterpoint. Yeah, does that make sense? So you want those two part, or if you have three, that's harder. But I mean, Kiem's writing a fugue. You kind of have to have three voices for a fugue.
Yeah.
You would be able to you'd have three guitarists say, here, guitar one, here's your melody part, guitar two, here's your part, guitar three, here's your part. And they'd be very happy to play their parts. They'd make sense on their own. But then when you put them into a solo guitar piece, you can still, it's a challenge to do that. But it's doable. Yeah. Here's another section where it's a little bit busier, and I guess the counterpoint is more subtle. It's more under the surface, but it's there. So I'll play the top line. I'd say that's a third voice that enters there very momentarily. It kind of gets answered by the bass voice, like mimicked a little bit there. So what I'll do is I'll play the top voice, and I'll play this one very softly. It's just a little like, trickle of a third voice, and then I'll play the bass voice, and then I'll play them all together. All right, so here's the top voice. So it's the top voice and then the bass. And then together. Right. I think if you study music, great contrapuntal music like that, where you separate the voices and then you put them back together again, you'll learn a lot about counterpoint. So you take Bach, take Tárrega, take Barrios, take Tedesco. These are some composers I can think of off the top of my head who write music with great counterpoint. if you can separate those voices, bass and melody and third voice, if there is a third voice, and then put them back together and try and understand what's happening a little bit with each voice, it's a very, very good way to start learning about counterpoint. Because there's all these rules and stuff in species counterpoint. There's something called species counterpoint, but it doesn't really get to the heart of it. I would say the heart of it is what we see right here. It's like separate these voices out, understand how counterpoint works in great music. Just by doing that, you'll learn a lot. Yeah. That's how composers learned in the past. They copied out scores. Remember, Mozart himself said, "There is not a famous master whose music I have not industriously studied." So it's, studying music is and this aspect, like what we're studying here, is not unique to Bach. Many composers still today write with very sophisticated counterpoint, and some of them, the more modern ones, even Villa-Lobos, he has some great counterpoint at times as well. While we're on the topic of counterpoint, I will point out something, because when you ask the question, and so it gets me thinking. There are certain intervals that you want to emphasize when you do have notes sounding together. Do you guys know what those intervals are already?
Third and sixth, 10.
Exactly. Third, sixth, octaves, and tenths. Yeah. 3, 6, 8, 10. Yeah. 3, 6, 8, 10. And that's actually those are the technical exercises for this month as well, by the way. So that's good coincidence there. Third, sixth, octaves, and tenths. Okay, so these intervals, the octave is like a duplicate of itself. So we can kind of like cross that out. It's still important. It's still a very usable interval, but theoretically it's just a duplicate, C to C. It's an octave. So, but the third, the sixth, and the 10th is really special because they all derive from the third. And the third is where chords come from. The third is present in the harmonic series. If you go, right, there's the third right there. It's the harmonic, G sharp. It's a major third. It's pretty close to the fundamental pitch. So this is an interval that occurs in nature, the third. So if you invert a third, so if we have, let's say I put a B under this D here, that's a major third right there. But if I invert it, so if I put the B on top, for example, I'm going to get what interval?
A sixth.
A sixth. And then if I invert it the other way, I put the D. Let's keep this B here. Let's put the D sharp down the bottom now. So I'm flipping it this way now. So if I put the D down at the bottom, what interval do I get there?
It's still a sixth.
It's a sixth again. Yeah. Now, so that explains our sixth. The sixth is an inversion of a third. A tenth. Now, if I put this B down an octave, I will now get a tenth. An octave plus a third. So if I that's an octave B to B plus a third. That's a tenth. Okay, so a tenth is a third plus an octave, and a sixth is an inversion of a third. And then an octave is just a duplicate of itself. So if we look at the notes that are sounding together, most of the intervals will be these ones, 3, 6, 8, 10. So the first intervals that strictly sound together is this one. So that's a third. The next one is this one. Now that's not one of our intervals. However, I would argue what we want to look at, that's a passing note, and the note we want to look at is that. So C sharp to E is a tenth. So we get a third and then a tenth, and then we get D sharp to F sharp is a tenth, and then E to E is an octave. Okay, here we get an exception. I think A to F sharp, but again that could be a passing
6
note.
plus 10.
So if you go to this note, A
That's a
to C
10th.
sharp is a 10th, and then B to D sharp is a 10th again.
Yeah, that's a 10.
Okay, so if I play those intervals all together, and then we would end probably on just on a chord. Just end it like on a chord. So if I this is sometimes called a harmonic reduction, or you could call it maybe a contrapuntal reduction. So if I take out all those other passing notes and just play the fundamental notes that are played together, that's what we get. It sounds like a counterpoint exercise. If you've ever studied, it's called species counterpoint. That just about sounds like a counterpoint exercise. What I'm doing there, because he's following the rules of those notes on the big beats when they sound together. They must be mostly thirds, sixths, octaves, or tenths. Otherwise, if you want to write in this style, otherwise that you will not get a harmonious. The voices won't be harmonious together, if that makes sense. They won't agree. They will be very disagreeable. Sometimes we want disagreement. It's just like life, you can't live life without any disagreement. But you want to, at some point, you want to live your life mostly, hopefully, with agreeable. It's mostly agreeable. Sometimes you get disagreement, and you hope that disagreement will resolve. That's basically music as well. Mostly it's agreeable. There will be some places where it will be disagreeable, but that will resolve.
Quickly.
Quickly, and I mean, there's a spectrum. When you say quickly, sometimes it's very quickly, sometimes it's, sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but it will at some point resolve. So, yeah, if we keep going through here, we get E. If I put that E up an octave just to help you out. If you get intervals that are like beyond an octave, you can just call it a compound, whatever it is. So you can just use the letters E to C and disregard the octave and just say, well, E to C is a sixth. Yeah, E, F, G, A, B, C. It's a sixth plus an octave, or a compound sixth. A to C is a tenth. I'll just go through a quick C. I didn't actually realize this. I'm glad you asked the question, because I didn't realize. C to A is a sixth. D to F sharp's a third. D to D is an octave. Is that a coincidence? B to G is a tenth. Even when we get these, look at that. All these together. 10, 8, 6, 10. Is that a coincidence? I don't think so. Here we get 6, 3, 3, 3, 3. Yeah?
Oh, 3.
Yeah. Here, 10, 10,
Yeah.
10, octave,
Yeah.
10. Disagreeable, but it resolves. So I'll play that bit. Disagreeable, and then it resolves. So what I'd be looking at is that one, which is a sixth. And then if you want to see the pattern, the disagreeable ones will usually be any number in between 3, 6, so like 4, 2, 6, 2, 4, 6. Usually they're usually the most, well, not 6, sorry, 2 and 4, and 7, 2, 4 and 7 are usually the most disagreeable notes against another, the most disagreeable intervals, 2 seconds, fourths and sevenths. Then here, there we go. What do we get there? G to C sharp. Resolves though, again.
Yeah.
That is our famous
Augmented
fourth, which they used, the Catholic Church used to call the devil in music. So that you've got to treat that one very carefully. You definitely got to resolve that. I think they just about wanted to ban this interval at some point. So that's a fourth going down to a third, and then we get another one. That's another augmented fourth, E to A sharp. So a fourth, that one goes up to the fifth, which is unusual. But we're heading to a cadence, so a little bit different maybe. And then that trill, that's definitely tension above the bass note, and the resolution is there. And that's why we trill. Because we want to emphasize, we bring out the tension like that. So it's actually a third, but it's the fourth that is being emphasized there with the trill. And then if you analyze that, that's a tenth, from that's an octave lower from that one. So that would be a tenth there, and then octave, and then we get thirds all the way, thirds there, yeah. Say that's an octave. It's a great exercise, to play, to try and create some kind of reduction like that, and actually play it. So I play that. That's the second measure, right? Now if I play them together, he's basically embellished they're like pillars, right? Those intervals, and then he's just decorated around those pillars. That's basically what he's done. And this is a form of composing actually that I like to call outlining, and this is what we will study later on in this series on the Allemande. We will study a way of composing called outlining, where you actually start just like that. You start with these chords or these intervals, and then from there, you add notes in between, and it just sounds more embellished. So if I did the same thing here, isn't that nice, right? The count, even the reduction is beautiful. So that's a good sign. If your reduction's working, it's hard for things to go wrong. It's pretty hard to fail if your reduction is strong, it's already beautiful. Right? Nice. Beautiful. Okay, so this is a little introduction to counterpoint. Just remember that if you're going to think about counterpoint, just using those intervals together whenever notes do occur together. I will say a general rule is that you generally want to avoid too many of the same interval. So you notice that there's quite a bit of variety. Like he doesn't use the same interval too many times in a row. Maybe there we get a lot of thirds. That's probably the most that we see though. The rest is pretty, it's pretty varied. 3, 10, 10, 8, 10, 10, 6, 10, 6, 3. You've got to use a variety. Otherwise, the voices will lose their independence. They'll sound too much like the same voice. It's that changing interval that helps to distinguish the voices from each other. So, yeah, I mean, you can take that just using those intervals, and you can combine them in different ways, and you can create some great music just from doing that. Okay, so there's our little aside there for counterpoint. For now, we'll discuss more when it comes to outlining. So final thing, I think is the last point. 2 points, yeah. Sequences. Okay, sequences. So Bach does use quite a bit of sequence in this Allemande. So in the B section, there's a nice sequence here. And then he sequences again, a new sequence. Okay, so a sequence, is a melody repeating up or down by step multiple times. It's a really great way to, it's like motivic development, you could say. If you have an original melody, it's always a nice idea to say, what would happen? What would happen if I sequence this melody? So the melody is both in the bass and the treble, in both voices. But just to illustrate, I'll play the melody because you'll probably hear the sequence more. Then down. And then down again. And then you can have sequences that it doesn't necessarily have to be by step. You could call something that's, that's like here, it's a very similar shape there as it is here. I guess that would be up a fourth, I think. G to C, G, A, B, C, E to A, E, F, G, A, right? So it's almost like a form of transposition. Sequence is kind of like a transposition, but you're staying in the same key. You're not changing key. Transpose means you're shifting the notes and changing keys. A sequence means you are shifting the notes of a melody, but staying in the same key. Does that make sense? A little bit, yeah? We will spend time on these techniques, sequences and transposition, and go into more depth. But if you know Bach, he loves sequences. Some of his most kind of thing, right? You hear that same melody multiple times in a row. Another very famous one. Right, original, then up, then up. If you do it more than by step, you can run into some challenges, especially if you do it multiple times. So usually a sequence will be, like at least 3 to 4 would be about the number you're aiming for. So if you do it by more than a step, by the time you get to the third or fourth one, you're going to be so high or so low that you're going to run into trouble on the guitar. Maybe in piano music they might, they got more notes. Maybe they can do more larger sequences. But yeah, generally it's by step. It's a really fun, another great one for improvising with, if you compose a little melody. I just took that little and then add your so that's just a little improvisation, just starting with a melody, sequencing it up. You can go down. That's the same melody going down step by step by step. Obviously, you don't want to repeat it too many times because then it becomes too predictable. That's why it's generally 3 to 4. And finally, harmony. So Bach uses lots of passing key changes, which we talked about, tonicizations or passing modulations, especially in the B section or even in the A section. In both sections, he does change keys using the gateway chord, secondary dominant. So I marked those in red in the B section here. We go A7 to D major, F7 to B minor, E7, A minor, D to G, B7 to E minor, and then So he's just using those gateway chords, which we learned about. Remember, gateway chords, you can go to any key you want to. The typical ones to move to are the ones that are neighboring. So if you're in E minor, you've got A minor over here, you've got B over here, you've got G over here, you've got D over here on the circle of fifths, right? And then you'd have C major over there, which he doesn't use C major, but I think all of those other ones he goes to. So here's our original tonic. He went to D major, which is close by, neighboring to E minor, neighboring over there. And then he went to B minor, up that way. And then he went to A minor, that way. You can, with the gateway chords, you can go anywhere you like. Any key you want to go to, you can go there, yeah? With the dominant of that key. The further away it is, though, the maybe the harder it is to do smoothly and subtly. Let's put it that way. Okay, so that's harmony, and then we've got a canvas here, which is just maps out the number of measures, it maps out the passing modulations and the harmony. So a lot of people just see this canvas and bang, they just go, and an Allemande comes out in a couple of days, it's like, but see, you can give it a go, you can give it a start, you can improvise through, you can sketch something out just by following the harmonies, just using semiquavers and two voices, and make sure those two voices, when they do coincide, they're using third, sixth octaves and tenths mostly, and that you're outlining the harmony. These are things, and that you're doing the things like transpose, like this transpose bar 1, right? I've got that there, transpose bar 1 and then transpose bar 8, for example. Otherwise, pretty straightforward, I think, with the template.